Why people doesn't recognize God's voice. Did you know that most believers struggle to recognize when God is actually speaking to them? Studies show that even devout Christians often can't tell the difference between God's voice, their own thoughts, and outside influences. So here's the real question. How do you know if it's God speaking or if it's something else entirely? If you've ever asked yourself, was that really God or just my mind? You're not alone. Today I'm breaking down the clear signs that separate God's voice from your thoughts. And trust me, some of these might shock you. Let's get into it. One, God's voice is the only way to connect with Him. Some might think I sound crazy when I say that God's voice is the only way we can truly connect with Him, but hear me out. We all know that God doesn't have a physical body like we do. He is not bound by flesh, space, or time. This means the only way for us to communicate with Him is through hearing His voice and responding to it. You will never actually see God in the way you see another person. But does that mean He isn't there? Absolutely not. Okay, let me prove this to you. Let's take it back to the very first humans, Adam and Eve. If anyone should have had the ability to see God, it would be them, right? But what does the Bible actually say? Genesis chapter 3, verse 8 states, "And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden." Did you catch that? They heard Him. They didn't see Him. From the very beginning, God's presence was known through His voice, not His visible form. Adam and Eve didn't physically see God walking through the garden like a human. They heard His movement in voice. This alone tells us something critical. God reveals Himself first through what we hear. And this pattern continues all throughout the Bible. Every major encounter with God, it's His voice that speaks. From Abraham to Moses, from Elijah to the prophets, they heard Him, not saw Him. Even Enoch, who is said to have walked with God so closely that he was taken up into heaven, heard God rather than seeing Him directly. The connection between Enoch and God was through hearing the words of the Holy One. God's voice is the divine bridge between humanity and the spiritual realm. We can't physically see Him, but we can hear Him if we listen. Maybe these two examples aren't enough to convince you. You might be thinking, well, we had Jesus, our one and only Yeshua. Yes, perfect. Yeshua Himself proves that the only way we can connect to God is through His voice, through His words, through His divine revelation. How? Let's go straight to John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld His glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Jesus was the Word in the flesh. This means that even when people saw Jesus physically, the true power of their connection to Him wasn't in seeing Him, but in hearing His words and believing in them. This is exactly why Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." Notice that He doesn't say, "My sheep see me and follow me." No, He says, "My sheep hear my voice." Jesus was making it clear. It's not about seeing, it's about hearing and responding. Even when Jesus was physically on earth, His goal wasn't for people to rely on His physical presence, but to teach them to listen to His voice, the very voice of God. Because Jesus knew He wasn't going to be with us physically forever, but His word would. Think about this. Even today, we don't see Jesus walking in the streets, but we still follow Him. How? By listening to His words, by reading the Bible, by praying, by discerning His voice in our hearts. God's voice is not like human speech. It's deeper, it's spiritual, It's the connection between the unseen God and us, his creation. And here's the truth. If you cannot hear God, you cannot know him. John chapter 4, verse 24 states, God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. God is spirit. That means his voice is the signal, the connection, the lifeline that keeps us close to him. Why people does not recognize God's voice? People often don't recognize God's voice because of 1. Lack of knowledge who really God is. 2. They don't know Jesus. 3. Distractions of the world. 4. Lack of spiritual connection. 5. Skepticism. 6. Fear or not knowing what to listen for. Keep seeking him through prayer, reading his word, and silencing distractions. The more you know his word, the clearer his voice becomes.